decades, religious conflict has led to the loss of millions of lives. It tears societies apart and at times lead to irreparable and irreconcilable situations. The ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine immediately comes to mind. The violent killings by ISIS in the Middle East and the reign of terror unleashed by the Boko Haram sect in Nigeria. These events have opened up discussions on religion and spirituality and the role it should play in societies and in our personal lives. Well, to take this discussion forward here, I am joined by world-renowned human behavior specialist, Dr. John Demartini. Welcome.
All right, thank you.
Religion is used as a weapon in many parts of the world. Do you think this is because there is a disconnect between religion and spirituality? Is there a difference?
Well, there are different stages of, you could describe as moral development in society. You have the lowest stage that Kohlberg described in psychology is pain, pleasure, punishment, reward, wrong, right, bad, good, very fundamental, very black and white, very rigid. And individuals that are in that stage of development will perceive their spirituality in terms of very black and white thinking. And anybody who agrees with them will be considered good. Anybody that disagrees with them will be considered bad. And there's not a lot of flexibility. There's no resiliency. There's no adaptability. There's very black and white. It's the lowest stage of moral development. The second stage is subordination to individual authorities. And this is a stage of development where we subordinate to mothers, fathers, preachers, teachers. And it's not completely black and white, it's some gray areas, but it's based on some authority. The third stage is a collective authority, where the larger the group of people, that must be true, so we will subordinate to that based on the masses. And it's sort of a herd instinct, the sheep versus the shepherd. And the final one, stage of development, is transcendent, where you now allow yourself to know that everybody has a place, that every value system is in a big matrix. The whole thing makes up a learning process of love, and kind of like a dialectic, trying to pair of opposites, trying to join and unite and to make a spiritual experience. This is called the dialectic. Hegel described this, Zeno described this, Plato described this. So there's different stages, and each individual, based on how fulfilled they are in their life, will play at different stages. If a person's living by their highest values and they feel inspired by their life, they'll play at the transcendent level. If a person is feeling subordinate and feel like everything around them is they're suppressed by, and they're feeling like that it's not doing what they love to do and they're not things, they'll go down to the fundamental level. That fundamental level is where most of the clashes occur in the world. And it's not bad or good, it's anytime you project self-righteously, your values and your rightness onto somebody else that has a different set of values, clashes are going to occur. All it's going to do is eventually get you the repercussions of the war to try to train you as a feedback mechanism to let you know that if you're not adaptable, you'll keep banging your head against the wall trying to expect other people to live in your values. When in reality, we're here to learn how to appreciate and love all the values and appreciate people for who they are. Because everybody wants to be loved and appreciated for who they are, not who we expect them to be. So the more fundamental we are, the more we project our values onto the world and expect the world to match our little tribal idea. The more universal we are, the more we appreciate life as it is and all the people playing a role in that. It's all spiritual, because all levels are spirituality. And whatever inspires you most is part of your spiritual quest. And whatever your values are, whatever's highest on your value is your spiritual quest. But it's all teaching us how to learn how to love people for who they are, ultimately. And so the religions of the world are gradations. Will Durant showed that in his cultural studies. And William James showed it in his work, that there's gradations and levels of awareness and spirituality, but the ultimate is thank you, I love you. When I ask people around the world, if you had only 24 hours to live, what would you do with your life? They say, I would like to say to the people who've contributed to my life, thank you, I love you. And we all want to be loved and appreciated for who we are. So anytime we're not doing that, we're projecting our values onto other people, trying to let them live in our values, which is futile, or injecting other people's values into our life and trying to live their values, which is futile, only to teach us that fundamental level is giving us feedback to let us know that we're not being honorable of who we are and who the other people are. So all of it is a spiritual quest to teach us how to love.
How do you approach spirituality?
Well, I always say that we're all spiritual, and whatever inspires us most is our spiritual path. And nobody's more or less really spiritual. but we have little boxes about what we think spirituality is, and we're learning how to break through those boxes and those boundaries. Emerson said in his essays on circles that we get helmed in by a belief system, a paradigm, a convention, a moray, a religious idealism, only to eventually discover that we're not living by that 100%, and neither is anybody else. And we eventually transcend that and finally encompass a greater level. And Schopenhauer says that we become our true self to the degree that we make everyone else ourself. When we finally realize that everybody out there represents a part of us, and the part we don't love about ourselves is the one we're angry out the outside with, we eventually learn that everybody out there is trying to teach us how to love all of us and to live an inspired life. And so I think that spirituality is something transcendent to a particular religious construct, but every person, every religion has different people in different stages of awareness. So you could take any religion and find somebody who's in the transcendent level or in the fundamental level. And you could find that everybody is doing what they think is the most inspiring and most meaningful thing to their life at the time, at that stage. Just like you have kindergarten class and first grade, and you got PhD and Professor Emeritus and Nobel Prize winners, in religion you have a scale of people's awareness.
Sure. In your seminars you work with people from across all types of religious backgrounds. Do you find that challenging? Do challenges come up for them because religion is a divisive factor? What are some of the common threads that come out of your seminars when dealing with spirituality and religion?
Well, when I was in my 20s, I started studying comparative religions, and I found an encyclopedia that had a list of every known religion of 50,000 people or more. There were 3,000 different religions that I got to study. And I was interested in what was common to them more so than what was different, although you had to also read what was different. And I realized that there were certain things that were common to people around the world that they all wanted. They wanted to be appreciated, they wanted to love, they wanted to fulfill what was meaningful to them, they wanted to raise a family, they wanted to contribute to the world, make a difference. There were certain things. And then there were individual, local, you might say, belief systems that were common to just the local regions. And eventually, the higher the religion, the more universal religion, the more it had to encompass all those variations and come up with a more universal construct. So when I came through that studies, I was less interested in trying to promote one or the other, but to try to appreciate all of them. And so when I have people from all different religions in my program, I try to go and study all the religions. So I may find myself reading the biblical writings or the Quran or the Popol Vuh from the Mayans, or maybe the Tibetan Book of the Dead or the Bardo Thadal. I may read all of them and try to understand them, so when I can communicate with them, I can hopefully talk in their values and in their language the universal theme that I'm trying to portray.
I think what you just said is so important and so relevant, because in my younger days as well, the wall came up for me in terms of how do I want to expand. How do I expand? I need to step away from my religious domain. And the fear does come in when you want to step away, but you have to be willing to grow. And I think the best way forward, as you just said right now, for people to reach out to each other, to remove the boundaries of separation, is to really open up to the world, to really appreciate everybody.
Well, I like to think of it this way. This may be a little abstract, but before the internet, people lived locally. Before we had transport, people lived locally. Then we started having bicycles and animals to take us place. We started living in a broader horizon. But now we live globally. Now we fly around the world. We have a global thing. And now we're on the internet, and we don't even have the same, there's no local times. It's all now. So the internet is making us realize that the local environment that we live in that had a limited belief system is now becoming more global, and we're now realizing that everybody that we're talking to on the internet is everybody with every different faith and religion. And if we really want to make a difference in the world, we have to care enough about other individuals with their value systems and their belief systems and find out how that serves us and communicate. When I was about 27, I started writing a book called The Tree of Life, which is on comparative religions. And I met one of the great Indian gurus, and he had about 8 million followers at the time. And we were having a discussion on some of the literature that he had. And I read all the writings that he had just out of curiosity. And we had discussions, and I said, if all you do is speak to the people that already believe in your system, and you don't encompass other religions, you'll limit yourself. I said, why would you not want to study all the religions so you could talk in their language and then introduce your religion to new groups of people? Otherwise, you're just talking to the same people. And he thought about that. So he went on to Cambridge and studied comparative religions and came back and started communicating in everybody's language and reached out to more people. And now was able to communicate what he wanted to say in terms of other people's values and didn't offend anybody, but actually encompassed and then expanded their awareness of what he was doing. And at the same time, he expanded his awareness of what they were doing. And to me, that is more of a collective awareness, a more socially universal thinking. And I believe that all the religious experiences are feedback mechanisms ultimately to get individuals and humanity to that level of awareness.
And that universal language is the language of love at the end of the day.
I would say love is a synthesis. It's a synthesis and synchronicity of all opposites. There's a law in sociology called the law of heuristic escalation. Law of heuristic escalation says that whatever somebody wants to impose that they think will bring good to the world and impose order to the world, there'll be somebody creating an opposite, because there's always pairs of opposites in society. And when you finally realize that the thesis and the opposite thesis, antithesis, when joined together and appreciated, you rise above it into a synthesis. When you can do that at the same time, you get the transcendent state, the highest level of spiritual and moral development. And that's when you actually appreciate people for who they are. Everybody wants to be loved and appreciated for who they are. And everybody has that paradox of pairs of opposites inside themselves.
And we need to go beyond religion.
We have to go beyond the duality.
Connect, not even have this conversation. I grew up at a time where I was taught never to discuss religion because it's divisive. Avoid it. Do not impose your religious beliefs on people. And that's the era I grew up in. So what's happening out there, it surprises me that it's become so extreme. And what I'm also fascinated about is what I find in religious leaders that are very self-righteous. People actually put religious leaders unnecessarily on pedestals. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say nobody's worth putting on pedestals or putting in pits, but everybody's worth putting in hearts. I say the same thing in my seminar, The Breakthrough Experience, as I travel. Nobody's worth putting on pedestals. No religious leader is to be put on such a beyond human level that you rob them of their own humanity. If you do, you will basically minimize yourself and the exaggeration of them, which will then stop you from opening your heart. So I always say that whatever you see in the people around you, find within you. It's not missing. I was in Nepal, and I met with the Bonpo Lama, and went up to the top of his temple at the top of this mountain. And we had this fantastic conversation about the illusion of missingness in people's life, and how the void we have that wants us to drive to fulfill our lives because we think things are missing. And he was talking about that ultimately there's nothing missing in all of us, and whatever we see in all of us is everybody else inside us. And it matches Schopenhauer's idea. So the wisdom is being able to see beyond the box that we're in and realize that nobody's more or less spiritual than anybody else. In the big picture, everybody is necessary in the overall matrix of love that's in the planet. So we're here to learn how to appreciate people for who they are, all of them, everything out there. And it takes a great a magnanimous individual to be able to bring that into a person. But at the same time, that's our ambition. That's our goal. Because ultimately, we have to, if we were all of a sudden attacked by an alien civilization, all of our religious biases would step aside. And we'd eventually realize we're a human being. And we're here to survive as a human being and thrive as a human being. So I think that eventually human beings will realize that this is just an illusion, this differentiation. And I think the ancients used to say there's a law of similars and differences. When we see too many similarities, we infatuate and unite. We see too many differences, we divide. But if we see both of them, we feel love. And I think that's what realize that we have something similar to another person. It's different form, but we have everything they have in a slightly different form. The law of similarities and differences allow us to relate to people and yet distinguish ourselves and learn how to love.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful, wonderful conversation.
Thank you.